Apologize for being not able to start exactly on time, but we will get to things as soon as possible. We did begin the meeting at 6 o'clock on some personnel issues. We are back. We are in open session right now. At this time, I would like the approval of minutes from our April 10th and our April 6th meetings.
So moved.
Second. Did you get two people? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I need approval of the agenda. Are we going to make any changes?
No, pass it.
Okay.
So moved.
Second. Jack and Katie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next part of our meeting is our public comments, and I know that there are people here that have turned in slips to speak. You need to fill one of these out if you are wanting to speak to the board. If you haven't done that, I know that somebody in the back would help you. At this point, I just want to lay out our procedure for public comments is that you get 3 minutes. When you come up, we'd like you to sit at one of those tables or one of the chairs by the table. There's a microphone there. These meetings are recorded, and we'll have an opportunity to hear you there. You will be timed, so please try to make your comments ending at that 3-minute mark. And I will just call you up one by one when you come up. It would help us if you would just say your name and where you live in the community. So with that, Robert Peltzer. Thank you, Robert.
Hi, my name is Robert Pelzer. I reside at 1919 Manchester Crossing in Waunakee. I have over 25 years of commercial construction experience as a senior estimator and project manager. I'm not an employee of or related to the construction manager for the new Heritage Elementary School, nor to any of the bidders who have to date put a competitive bid together for the Heritage Elementary School project. I am here tonight to ask the board to respect the construction bid process in the award of the structural steel package for the new Heritage Elementary School. I'm asking the board to approve the lowest bidder, J.P. Cullen. The budget for the steel erection was $850,000. The Cullen bid was $826,714. That bid is $23,286 under the budget. The facility committee is recommending award of the package to the second low bidder, Badgerland. Badgerland's bid was $838,000. This is only $12,000 under budget. The board would forego $11,286 of savings if they award the steel erection scope to the second low bidder. More concerning to me as a construction professional is companies in the construction industry may not bid future projects or work scopes for the district. They feel the competitive bid process as being advertised is not being respected. We are still early in the bid process with many work scopes to bid for the Heritage Elementary School project, as well as the new middle school. As a district, we need to show a fair and competitive bid process for these projects. I respect and appreciate all that our local businesses do in donations, fundraising, and services for the district, and those activities not covered in the school budget. The taxpayer of the district also do provide donations, fundraising, and time in addition to their taxes. When using the competitive bid process for contract awards, the award for the contract should be based on the lowest qualified bidder. This is the most respectful approach for the company's bidding and the most responsible action for the taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Next, Adam Menton.
So my name is Adam Mentink, and I'm actually reading a letter on behalf of Jeannie Cullen Schultz, who is a Waunakee resident. Dear school board members, the purpose of this letter is to understand the facility committee's recommendation regarding the steel erection scope of work at the new Heritage Elementary School and to ask for further consideration by the board at the May 8th board meeting. In addition, it is to further understand the Waunakee Community School Board's approach and ultimate evaluation process of subcontractor trade package bids. I apologize that I cannot be there in person to present this letter. However, I am out of state for a professional development conference. I'm writing this letter on behalf of myself as a resident and our company, J.P. Cullen. J.P. Cullen was fortunate to partner with Waunakee Community School District in 2019 and worked on the high school project. I appreciate your time and consideration. For those not previously on the board, J.P. Cullen was thankful and appreciative of being able to participate in the construction manager RFP and interview process for these projects back in 2019. While our firm was not selected, we were encouraged to look for opportunities to participate and support the district and the projects. Like other trade partners, our participation will ensure the district has competition and ultimately the best value for the project, while also providing expertise that delivers on safety, costs, and schedule. This would be done through bidding on the trade packages that J.P. Cullen self-performs. The first opportunity was to bid on the steel erection package. We are excited to participate in the steel erection bid for several reasons, including our expertise in steel erection, our local involvement within Waunakee and the school district, and our ability to provide the district with a complete and low-cost bid. First is our expertise in steel erection. We have a dedicated steel erection group that performs outhouse work for other construction managers and general contractors. Chad Shackelman, a Waunakee resident and parent, oversees this group. While J.P. Cullen does not have a storefront in Waunakee, we currently have employees who live in the district and are active community members. One of these members is Donnie Olday, a 1996 graduate of WHS and parent of 2 boys attending the high school. Donnie's a proud union ironworker and would erect the steel at the new Heritage Elementary School. Lastly, per the published bid tab, our team provided the most cost-effective and complete bid for this scope of work. Our team worked diligently to put together the low bid for the district. As the owner, co-president and Waunakee resident since 2013, and someone who would like to participate in the future Waunakee Community School District building and construction manager opportunities, I would like to better understand the district's evaluation of bids, selection process, and corresponding metrics for selection. As a resident, I am very excited about the investment this referendum and ultimate buildings will provide to our community, the district and its staff, and most importantly, current and future students. I thank everyone for their time and look forward to a better understanding of these items and an opportunity to perform the steel erection on the new Heritage Elementary School. Sincerely, Jeannie Cullen Schultz.
Thank you, Adam. Next is Donnie O'Day.
Hi, Ms. Ensign, Mr. Hetzel.
Hi, Donnie.
Dear school board members, I'm Donnie Olday. I live in the Northridge area in Waunakee. I've been a part of the Waunakee community since 1991 and graduated in 1996 from Waunakee High School. I am accompanied by my wife, Tammy, who was born and raised in this community. I have 2 wonderful children, sometimes wonderful, 2 boys, a senior and a freshman in high school, and they're active in hockey and other sports. Like you guys just heard, I'm a proud union iron worker and I'm employed with J.P. Cullen in our steel division. We perform outhouse work for other construction managers and general contractors. We do work throughout the state of Wisconsin. Much of my work has been out of this community, which is why I was pretty excited to hear that we're involved in the bidding process on getting the steel here. This would actually be my project, and my name would be on it, which would take a lot of pride for that. I'd get a chance to be involved with the buildings alongside my fellow employees to improve our schools and our children's experiences in my hometown. While we're not selected to CM, our company and my coworkers, including our co-president, owner that live in Waunakee, thought it was important to pursue the bid package that J.P. Cullen self-performs. Steel erection provides us with a great opportunity to do just that. Our team worked hard to put together a competitive and complete number that, as you already know, was a low bid for the project. I'm extremely confident that our J.P. Cullen team can provide a safe, quality, and cost-effective project that the taxpayers deserve. For these reasons, when I heard that we were the low steel erection bidders, I was obviously excited about leading the steel erection on the Heritage Elementary School project. It's my understanding that we were not recommended because we may not be considered local, and that as a company, we perform more work than just steel. While it is true that we self-perform more work than just steel on various projects, we do have a specifically focused steel division in which our vice president that leads this division resides in Waunakee as well. As for the local side of things, like we just heard, was we don't have a storefront here, but I believe that between myself and my coworkers, we have a local presence that is extremely committed to this community. We have many coworkers in the district that either currently have or have had kids in the district, including our co-president and owner, as well as our division vice president who oversees our steel division. In addition, we are a certified AISC steel erector, and we were just honored, I believe last week, with the Wisconsin Safety Council Corporate Safety Award. In closing, I would just like to ask the board to reconsider our low bid for this project. Good.
Perfect, right on through.
Awesome. Thank you very much for.
Thank you, Donnie. And the last speaker tonight is Chris Miller.
Hello, my name is Chris Miller. I live at 807 Ronald Overlook in Waunakee. My family and I have been a part of the Waunakee community since we moved here in 2017. My wife is currently employed by the school district as a paraeducator at Prairie, and my son and daughter both attend Prairie Elementary School as well. I'm a project manager at JP Cullen and split my time between bidding projects and managing projects. The hard bid construction world is a very competitive market with thin profit margins. To be the lowest bidder on a project takes a lot of effort and time to develop the competitive advantage required to drive to the lowest cost. With limited resources, we must pick and choose which projects we spend our time on going after. Most often we choose to go after projects that will mean the most to our communities and to our people. This project is a perfect example of that. We have invested a tremendous amount of our time to be the low qualified bidder, effort that we must choose where to spend wisely to remain in business. I trust that the recommendation of the facility committee is based on good intentions, but I'm requesting that the board follow the best interest of the taxpayers and award the steel erection package to JP Cullen. My Waunakee colleagues and I will be proud to be a part of this project. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for speaking. Next, we have our report, starting with our staff report. Gina? We're going to do staff first. Well, that's the way it's on the agenda. Story. You were just ready.
It's ready to go.
Maybe you guys want a co-chair there.
Right, my name is Gina Pagel, and I am the representative of the WTA this evening. I want to start off by saying Happy Teacher Appreciation Week to all the incredible educators out there from the WTA. We believe that public schools are the heart of our community and that educators are the heartbeat. A couple of questions and concerns that came up from teachers in the last month were around the open enrollment for insurance. It's a very short time frame, and lots of staff are saying that they do not understand the differences and the options, and we want to just be sure that this is remedied before the window opens, which is like Wednesday. So I'll touch base with Brian, but we wanted to make sure that that was addressed. Also, we have a couple of other celebrations today. Thank you to you all for visiting our schools and the listening sessions. Open communication is key, and we're grateful that you set aside the time to listen. And we also appreciated the slightly more guided format of this year's time together. There have been many amazing arts opportunities for our students lately, and we just wanted to shout out to students and staff who are a part of the Arboretum art show that went well, and the other elementary schools are looking forward to theirs coming up soon. Heritage and Prairie music programs were a huge success, and Arboretum is excited about ours coming up as well. And we also wanted to note the incredible Sound of Music performance that took place in the last week. It was nice to see some former students, Ted, on stage, and it was a lot of fun. So, thank you.
Thank you, Gina. And now, Izzy, hop right up there.
Thanks. Okay. So to start off, Caden wishes he could be here, but he has golf today, so wasn't able to make it. And right away, we have AP testing this week. We had it last week as well. So there's kind of like, a lot of people at school are a little nervous, a little stressed out, but the other half is are all ready to go and ready to go for summer. So everybody's just trying to push through this last week. Student and staff are both super excited for the upcoming student versus staff basketball game. And there was a video shown and advisory that was super funny, and it was just pretty much the teachers coming at the students, students coming at the teachers, and it made advisory really fun today. Prom went really well. I know I had a lot of fun, my friends had a lot of fun. There wasn't really any major issues. I know in the past there has been some issues with crowd surfing, but there was none this time. The high school had the Sound of Music performed. I wasn't able to go, but I heard really good things about it, and it seems like a lot of people worked really hard for it. So this week, as the teacher said before, is Teacher Appreciation Week. Student Council, I was in charge of running the committee. We've got handwritten notes to all the teachers, and then teachers will be provided coffee and donuts on Thursday to show everybody's appreciation for all that you guys do. And yeah, everyone's just kind of starting to wind down, get ready for summer, starting to feel stress taken off. And then before I end, I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity for the last 2 years. I really enjoyed it. Wish I could do it again, but I've got to go to college. But I know school board rep, there's a lot of people applying to try and become in student council, so I'm sure you guys will get somebody great next year.
That's awesome, and I want to thank you, Izzy. Your reports are always so complete and joyful, and it's always lovely to have you here. Now, is Caden a senior as well?
He is.
And please give him our regards to and thank him for the information he provided through the year. So
Yes,
it was
definitely.
wonderful.
Thank you all.
Any questions or comments for Izzy? Where will you go to college?
I'm going to UW-Madison, so I'll be close. Might come and visit a couple of times.
That would be great. You can always come back.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Izzy.
Thanks, Susan.
All right, moving on to board reports. Any events that the board attended that they'd like to share?
I attended the internship awards program and graduation with Randy and Tim Shaw. I want to do a shout out to Michelle, for coordinating, and all the students that participated, because it's a lot of work and a lot of effort, a lot of coordination. Also want to give a shout out to drama and the music department, because they did a spectacular job at the Sound of Music performance. I believe we had
Made it to all 3 performances. It was awesome.
Did you really? Good job, Ted.
So-
Yeah, I think many of us were able to attend the Sound of Music. It was just very, very well done. And, hats off to all the directors and the students and the crew and the parents and the partners that put on that kind of production.
I've had an opportunity to attend Sound of Music, loved it, really wanted to sing along, but I held myself back. And then I also was invited to participate in the heritage class at the high school. And so I enjoyed that opportunity, getting to get a better understanding of what that class was like and to connect with the students. And I also participated in a few of the Waunakee Cares Coalition sessions at the library. So that was very informational for me as well. And I would recommend anybody who has the time to take advantage of those opportunities to learn more.
I attended the MSN Institute partly on Thursday and more on Friday. Kudos to our staff that were there, central office with Amy and Tim and our support staff. We had representation from every one of our buildings, and Randy was there. Listening to different speakers talk about different issues related to minority students. On Friday there was a panel from the Middleton High School students who talked about their experiences as minority students within the Middleton district, and some carryover ideas that pertain to many different schools. They worked together and came up with a takeaway list that we're going to be seeing at some point at the DEI. So again, a really impactful conference. Also attended the Student Summit, Leadership Summit, and kudos to Michelle McGrath and Jessica Moan for their leadership with it. Had a nice representation from the students. They identified positive things that are happening within the district, and they came up with a list of some recommendations of things that are perhaps concerning. The plan is to have one final session before the year is out to try to come up with an action plan. And we will be either for sure hearing at the DEI, but possibly at the board as a whole from a group of the students to share their takeaway in the conference.
Great. Anything on this side of the room?
We're quiet.
I should have said this at the beginning, but never too late. I want to welcome Dawn, her very first official meeting, and just anything that you need, make sure you speak up. Thank you. All right, moving on to an update on the superintendent search. I understand the requests for proposals are back, and Brian, if you could come up and kind of give us an update on where we are with that process and what you need from us time-wise in the near future.
Thanks, Joan. Joan did share that correctly. We did send out the request for proposals. They were due on Friday. We sent it out to 13 search consultants. Heard back immediately from 2 that said they weren't pursuing it as an opportunity, and then did receive back 6 proposals from different firms interested in partnering in this work with us. And so as we kind of think back to what the process would be, the next step in the process would be a review of those proposals and a interview process to determine of 2 to 3 finalists to determine which firm most closely aligns with what the board's proposal is and their future interests. As we kind of looked at that, we targeted the last week in May to do those interviews, and so really between now and then need to determine how we want to take down the 6 applications or requests that we've gathered and take that down to a number that the board wants to interview. And I would really see, I think, kind of three possibilities for the board to do that. And then I really turn it to you to discuss and weigh out amongst each other which you think is the most merit. The first would be the whole board has that discussion together. That would need to be a special meeting. And so the interviews themselves would be a special meeting, and the discussion would be separate from that, in advance of that. Realistically, I think if we're gonna ask people to be on-site presenting to us, we should give them 2 weeks, 2 weeks of notice, which really means that we're notifying them beginning of next week who we'd like to have come and interview. So again, full board discussion within a special meeting, tasking a committee to take the current number of applicants down to the finalists for interviews. I would think the natural group would be the HR committee if you were going to go that route, but certainly, you could also go the route of an ad hoc, I suppose, creating something of interested parties. Or third option I would see is certainly, doing a cursory review of the proposals. Some of them are not as aligned as others with the requests. Some agencies don't do certain aspects of the search process that we had identified or you had identified in the proposals. I could work with Steve on that, take down to, 2 to 3, if whatever the board would direct, and then have that be the folks that are brought in for interviews. So I would kind of see whole board, committee of the board, or administrative review to take it down to the interviewed parties. Would be 3 tracks to get us to interviews that week of May 29th or 30th. Week of May 29th, that's Memorial Day, so it would be obviously 30th or later.
Okay, so options, or how do you want to assign this task? The whole board, which means we'd probably have to have a special meeting this week.
Yeah, realistically, yes.
Or a subgroup of this whole board, or leave it up to Brian and Steve.
I'm for the whole board.
Whole board, special meeting, full board special meeting. I did ask if we could kind of just individually rank them, but I have found out that goes against the open record or open meeting law. So we can't do it individually and look at our rankings. We need to do it as a meeting.
So are we gonna have pre-read, or is this?
You could do a pre-read of it, and then you could send those pieces in, but you'd still have to meet. But you couldn't narrow it down just by handing in because that's in essence voting.
Right.
But if you had some way that you wanted to kind of narrow it, like provide your input that was then part of a meeting, you'd be able to do that. So certainly those can get sent out to you to review prior. I think that would be very much prudent.
Right, that would help.
Do we know certain firms don't meet the requirements that we stated right off the bat?
Again, I would not say that I could recite all 6, in detail, but there are aspects of that do stand out where there is some that are missing. Certain aspects that the board had discussed. But I could not speak to how many things are missing.
So we couldn't eliminate 6 to 4 right off the bat?
That would be option 3 that you gave.
Yeah, right.
So you and Steve narrow it down to the ones that met our requirements, and then we look at it?
I would probably propose that,
Me too.
because if somebody didn't meet their requirements, then why do we bring them in?
But still meet as a full board to come up with, do we want to interview 2 or interview 3? So at the end of the meeting tonight, we'll set a special meeting to do just that task.
I mean, just for you to be thinking about when we look at this week, you already have the board DEI committee meeting at 5:30 on Thursday. So you have three of the board members are already here. So I think that meeting, Mark, what do you think is, hour and a half?
No more than 90 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, so you could do something at 6:30 or 7 that night if you chose to.
Okay. Well, can we look at that at the end?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. Next, we have a report from the village on TID number 3, and I believe Tim Semen comes forward.
Well, we appreciate Tim being here. I mean, Tim contacted Steve and I with regards to some of the things occurring with TID number 3, and we thought it was prudent for Tim to be able to be here to explain it himself, so that if there was any questions that you'd be able to ask him directly, as he'd be the greatest source to be able to inform you.
Excuse me. Thanks very much, Randy. Good evening, board members. It's nice to be here. I guess I think this might be my first school board meeting since I've been in this role. I'm Tim Seven, the Community Development Director for Waunakee, and next month it'll be 2 years for me in this role. So again, it's great to be here for this opportunity. Last month, the Village Community Development Authority took up the issue of the closure of our TID, or Tax Increment Finance District number 3. That district is coming to the end of its life on June 5th of this year, so very soon. And as part of that, certain obligations, financial obligations, are needed to close the district, the result of which is a bit of a surplus. And so that's what the table in the packet, as well as what's up on the screen right now, indicates. The projected remaining balance of TID number 3 will be about $775,000. There's a couple different options that could happen with those funds. One is simply returning that balance to all the taxing jurisdictions, the county, the village, the school district, as well as the tech college. And so those are enumerated in the second table up on the screen. Another option is to take that increment, that remaining surplus, and allocate that to affordable housing. And that's a procedure that is allowed by state statute. The village did that with, I believe, their last tax increment district, TID 2, for the creation of an affordable housing fund, which in part went to what's called the Village on Main project, housing project on Main Street. So really, the CDA at their meeting last month said, hey, we think this would be a good idea to use these funds to increase our affordable housing fund, which stands right now as you can see on the last little table, last column, or row rather, it's about $157,000. So that, in terms of providing assistance for affordable housing, really doesn't go that far. So this new total, the combination of the two, would really create a nice fund where some substantial things could be done to address affordable housing in the village. So the CDA recommended approval of that to the village board, that meaning the use of those funds to be allocated toward the village's affordable housing fund. However, they said before they take action, which is scheduled to be next week, May 15th, they directed staff to contact the rest of the taxing jurisdictions and get some commentary on your thoughts on what that would mean to the district. Good, bad. Otherwise, again, just looking for some feedback, and then I'm going to bring that feedback back to the village board before they make a decision. It is within the discretion of a municipality to essentially do this without the approval of the other taxing jurisdictions, but again, I was directed to contact and reach out those taxing jurisdictions and just get whatever feedback and commentary you would like me to pass on to the village board. So that's really what I'm here for, and again, thank you for the opportunity, and at this point, I'm all ears.
Tim, would you mind sharing some of the concepts for the use of the funds that have been talked about?
Oh, sure. So right now, it's in fact at the scheduled for the agenda for next week, also recommended by the CDA, is what's going to be called the Waunakee Housing Betterment Fund. And that is essentially a grant funding program which matches housing improvements, certain housing improvements, up to 10,000. So somewhere between, I remember if I get my numbers right, it's I think 2,000 to 10,000 with a 1-to-1 match by the applicant. So essentially that would result in $4,000 to $20,000 worth of improvement on a particular structure. The target for those, I would say, are some of the older homes in the village, And those applicants would have to be income qualified to participate in the program. The balance of the dollars, unknown because we don't have those yet. So it could be that the entirety of that fund or of the dollars allocated could be set aside for that fund, or with this new amount, other things could become eligible in the picture. So for example, a project like the Village on Main wouldn't have been possible really with that amount that we have in the balance, that 157. So something bigger than just a simply $2,000 to $10,000 grant matching program to improve single family housing stock, which is what the Betterment Fund is targeted toward. Bigger projects could be envisioned with these dollars. So those are, again, yet to be seen. It's a little cart before the horse to an extent. But anyway, so the village is likely to take action next week at that Waunakee Housing Betterment Fund. If everything goes forward as the CDA recommended, then discussions would be entertained in terms of what specifically to earmark those dollars for.
So when you talk about income qualified, what does that mean?
So there's actually a statutory definition of affordable under, I think it's chapter 66, that a person pays essentially no more than 30% of their income for housing costs. If you're above that, essentially it's considered unaffordable.
And these grants that you're giving out that are from $2,000 to $10,000, what do those actually do?
Right, so those would go towards, so there's eligible projects such as windows, siding, energy efficiency, roofing, things like that to help fix up older homes.
Are there federal programs that you can apply for that, or state programs that you can apply for that funding?
Possibly. There are. I know there are a couple county funds, but this would be earmarked specifically toward Waunakee residents.
What is the financial impact for the district with the TID closing?
What is the impact? So if you see,
I mean that's what's in the balance. But once the TID closes, it's my understanding that all of a sudden their taxes that haven't been paid will in fact start coming back into the different municipalities. So any idea what that impact is for the district?
Again, I'd use this chart as to approximate that. So this would be just a one time only.
Right.
The following year essentially would result in, oh boy, I'd have to talk to our finance director in terms of what the impact to each jurisdiction, each taxing jurisdiction would be to be made whole. You're talking about, yeah. This is just the balance of 1 year. So I guess I don't have that number at my fingertips.
I mean, at a high level, Mark, what I could answer for you is under the current school finance system, which is based on a revenue limit formula that defines the maximum amount of funding the school could bring in from property taxes and state aid. Generally speaking, when additional property of this size is brought onto the state aid formula, we would see a reduction on equalization aid because our district would become more property wealthy under the state aid system, and then it would be offset by what you're seeing on the screen, because then ultimately taxes would then be coming into the district. So generally speaking, it's intended in the state financing system to be very close, so that in the end the district would spend the same amount of money, but the sources of the funding would be a little different.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to be clear, when Tim communicated with us, Randy and I thought it was important to share this with the board. We appreciate Tim willing to come this evening. It's not an action item for the municipalities like MATC, Dane County, etc. It will be an action item for the village. And so Tim had the opportunity to come tonight. If there were questions at all about this process or any feedback that any board members wanted to share with the village, we certainly appreciate the village reaching out and providing that opportunity for the school board to provide feedback. If anyone has any questions or feedback for Tim, I know he'd be more than happy to take that back as part of this discussion.
Tim, can you remind us what TID 3 is? What?
Yeah, that was, helped start the business park on the east side of the village. And I think that was amended a couple different times. Yeah, but anyways, it was created to jumpstart the creation of the business park.
I guess just from the district standpoint, I don't know what the budget is, state budget is, you know, and how tight the state budget might be, you know, until that goes out. It would be nice to get the money for the school district. But I also understand, you know, we need affordable housing, you know, in the community. And I think if you look at some of our positions, you know, they may not be able to afford living in the community, and if they can't live in the community, holding them in those positions would be a challenge. So, you know, I can see it on both sides that it'd be great to have that funding come back to the district. However, you know, affordable housing is an issue as well.
Steve, that funding, if it comes back to the district, it doesn't really increase Fund 10 at all, does it? Because of the revenue cap?
It would only initially. Eventually, because what Tim is referring to is excess funds at the end of a tax district, which could be distributed back to entities, which that would not be a part of the revenue limit formula. But ultimately, when the property is on the tax rolls, then it would be. So you've heard of other communities where tax districts have closed and then funding was provided back to the municipalities. So it does happen from time to time, and those funds become available for those forms of government to use. It's just in the long run, it becomes part of the school finance system. And so in the end, it's just trading off local resources against state resources, at least the way school funding works.
Any other comments that you
No.
want to share?
I kind of share the
Yeah.
trouble, because I see the need for the village, but I also see where almost $500,000 would be of a huge benefit for the school district in terms of a lot of our different goals. And I guess I would just hope the village is mindful of that as well. Some of our neighboring school districts benefited because their municipalities did return the funds, and they were used to enhance the quality of the district. And in these kind of financial times, I see both needs, but I represent the district, and I would like the village to be mindful how beneficial that would be to the school district.
I would agree with what Mark said.
I share those sentiments as well.
Does that help you at all?
It does, no, it does, that's yeah, again, just looking for whatever your comments or feedback are, so, yeah, really appreciate it, and I'll certainly make the village board aware of those next month.
Perfect. Anything else you want to share to Tim? Okay, thank you, Tim.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Next, we have our committee reports, and If it's okay with the board, we have a number of Cullen personnel here waiting for that. If we could rearrange our committee reports a little bit, maybe we could do facility first. Does anybody have a concern with that?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Fine.
Let's jump down to facilities, which is after
They don't
all
want to know about our policies?
after all those policies. So the facility,
Read all of,
the facility committee report. As chair of that, before we actually get into that committee, I guess I personally really struggled for the whole week with the decision not to go with the low bid. When I looked at the totality of what does local mean. And I think as a 7-member board, I would like to entertain a little bit of discussion about low bid versus local. And share. This is a beginning. We have many, many bids to come. We have, another whole host of them yet in this project, and we have another whole building coming. And whoever is on that facility after we re-establish that committee, I think it's important that that committee know how this board feels about those two decisions. Low bid versus local. So can we kind of share a few thoughts on that?
Related, but not addressing your question directly. I just wanted to make sure that the subcommittee ensured that everything was apples to apples. Are there the same contingencies for each of the bidders? The outliers that were $250,000 higher, they understood the assignment.
We understand they
Yeah,
did.
those were all vetted out by Vogel Brothers as part of their process, and that was part of what what took place prior to those coming to the committee. And I think that was a piece that was also discussed at the committee level as far as them trying to ensure that those were quality bids that were addressing things per the specs that were put forth. Anything to add to that, Steve? Okay.
Well, I think one of the issues that was brought up here, how do you decide what local means? And I think that's something to be discussed. It's hard to quantify.
Well, and additionally, unless you're putting on the specs that local bidding has a priority, I think you're misleading the bidding process. And if you do put that on the bidding process, how are you going to get valid bids? And so I recognize how we would like to utilize local businesses, and they may not be at the same economic ability as larger companies, but how do we keep the bidding process fair then?
And keep people bidding.
And keep people bidding.
And that's a bigger concern is we want our bids to be competitive. And how do we ensure that will happen?
I think there's a lot of gray area in that right now, how it's established, and I think that I value working with local businesses. I think there's a lot of value in that. However, when there is a low bid and we haven't established what the definition of local means, I mean, we all may have different perspectives of what that means. I think there's just a lot to consider. And given the fact that JP Cullen was encouraged to continue to bid, and that they are the low bid in this situation, I think it makes sense to strongly consider them as a partner in this project.
Can I add a little history to it?
Perfect.
Yeah, so one of the things that I believe it was in 2013 or 2014, we had a conversation just prior to us doing all the bids with the intermediate school. And that conversation came through the policy committee at the time, or it might have been budget or facilities, but it was all policy related with regards to really our bidding process. And then how do we address anything with regards to local bidders into a project. And we had conversations about how do you define, exactly what Joan said, how do we define local bidder? Is it based on you actually have a storefront here? Is it based on number of workers? Is it within the boundaries of the school district? And I think at that point we were even talking about, or is it within the boundaries of the county? And then you start to kind of try to have those conversations. And then it was also a matter of, we had conversations about, well, even if we could define that, then what's the dollar increment that would allow for consideration of local bidder over someone else? Our policy never changed. We at that point decided that we had I think a kind of a spirit of the policy and concept of the policy was that we wanted to look at our local businesses, but we didn't come to agreement as far as how we were going to define that. That may be a piece that we have to go back to see how we can better define that and see if today we're able to put some greater specification to that. But we did have that conversation in 2013. We've utilized that kind of in spirit moving forward. But to many of the points, it's not articulated clearly and it's not part of the RFP.
Well, I think, when you look at something like this, when you look at, we're a bedroom community. Probably 80 to 85% of our taxes come from residential. So there's that balance. I think that, from the village standpoint, it's not a real problem for us. Because we're going to get our tax dollars. But I think just from a village standpoint, if we can support, a local business, and when I say local business, it's established. It's not just putting up a storefront, just to capture the bid. You could probably do an analysis of, all the taxes everybody pays and so forth. But I think in spirit of this, we looked at local business, meaning that they were established businesses in the community, and they've been here in the community. So. What we talked about is, a percentage difference. Obviously you're not going to pay 50% or 100% more just because they're here, but if they were competitive, we would err on the side of, the local business. There's opportunities for major companies to come in here and, obviously, all of these bids take a lot of time to put together. I agree, because I've been part of the process. When you look at it, a big company can come in here and shave off some dollars here and there to get the business, which leaves the smaller business, at a disadvantage. And I guess looking at it from a community standpoint, because we are part of the community, I guess I erred on, this company is, in the community. They've been established in the community. They've been here for a long time. I think they've been here since I've been on board, if not before. So that's kind of the rationale, you know, that I used in developing this.
But is that on the bidding process? Is that stipulated when the bids go out, that local businesses will be given preferences?
I don't think so. No.
So, you know, and I think in this particular case, that's probably the biggest question, because if that is a criteria, but we didn't advertise it as such, then I don't see how we can do anything but offer it to the lowest bidder. And in the future, indicate that.
I think if we do that in this particular case, we should just go low bid throughout the entire project.
In historical projects, were vendors or service providers ever given like an after-the-fact score, something quantifiable? Did they deliver on time into budget or to budget plus contingency? There's subjective feedback on how it was to work with a vendor and things like that as well. But is there any way to know from previous experiences whether there should be a weighting afforded to those who have provided good service and provided it on time and in
These
budget?
people provided services for the intermediate school, from my understanding. And, you know, they've performed well.
Yeah, one of the questions that came up that was asked of our Vogel brothers kind of vetted many of these things out, was that the strong recommendations on, you take a look at the two low bidders, meaning Rebecca, you can pull it up so you can see where those are. They had nothing but positives to say about either one as far as their experience, and we've had opportunities to work with Cullen in the past and through different projects here, and we've had a great experience working with them. Same with Badgerland.
And aside from cost, are there any other aspects of the bid and the information that was, I don't know if there's an RFI that went with the RFP? Anything else that's quantitative, or is it all just informational?
We did have a request from the facility committee to include the scope of work that went out to the vendor, so that is in the packet. That provides that background as far as what they were bidding on. So we did include that for information as well for anyone that did want to look at it. But generally speaking, all of that vetting and the process of comparing the proposals to the scope that went out is done by Vogel Brothers. And when they bring this information to us, they have spent their time doing the work to verify that the information you see as board members does meet the scope, and that they are confident, as Randy stated, that the two low proposals do meet the scope that was put forward. And they did have discussions with both firms to make sure that everything was being compared equally, and then took that into account when they presented this information to you. And as Mark is talking about the process of getting information out to vendors, our district purchasing policy is absent on any language on local purchasing. So if you were to pull it up and take a look at it right now, there isn't language in there that says going with one or the other would be a requirement of the board's policy. That would not be correct. As board members, you have the sole decision-making authority under our policy to select whichever firm you choose to do so. So our policy doesn't say right now, as an example, XYZ local firm has to be within X%. That's not there. So therefore, that was not shared with any bidders during the process. And if that is something the board wants to look at in the future, we're more than happy to have that discussion and take a look at that as well. Again, as Randy mentioned, we did look at that in the past, but we're not able to come to any conclusion on what that might look like. So just know there isn't anything in there right now other than $25,000 and above has to be approved by the board, really at the board's discretion based on the information that's presented.
Do you have any history of going with not the low bid? That we can recall? In significant amounts?
We've gone with direct negotiations with the entity that hasn't gone to the competitive bidding process, but I'm trying to think back, Steve, if we ever had a piece where we went with, not to my recollection, Ted, I just don't remember.
I mean, we certainly have selected partners during the referendum process outside of a process like this. So as an example, the board interviewed HVAC vendors, electrical vendors, plumbing vendors.
Different process.
We have a direct relationship with Endress in Waunakee. Those processes are different than this because it's more selecting specific partners up front. But I am not off the top of my head recalling something of this size where a local factor was applied to it. We just know that local business has been a priority for the board. We've encouraged all of the partners that we've worked with to continue to participate in the process. We did absolutely encourage J.P. Cullen to continue participating. They participated in the RFP pre-COVID as well, and we've successfully completed projects with them. So from administrative's perspective, we are always encouraging qualified partners to participate in our process. And we definitely have two of them here, both J.P. Cullen and Badgerland, that have been vetted by Vogel. Vogel is comfortable with both proposals, knows that both firms would do great work for us. So really it's at the point where, because it's over $25,000, it's in the board's hands to decide, but you do not have any guidance in your policy indicating, what this would be as a final decision. It's at the board's discretion.
So, there is a lot of gray area. I think we all agree upon that, and I know that they need this bid today because of moving the project forward. So I think we have to do the best we can with the knowledge we have. And if we need to come back at some point and redefine the process, I think that is something we need to do so that it stays competitive, but people know what they're bidding and how they're going to be analyzed in those bids. So
I'm going to make a motion to go with Badgerland.
I'll second.
Okay, so Badgerland has been motioned and seconded. Because of what I heard, I would like to do a voice vote, starting with Katie. Yes or no? No? Judy?
No.
I'm going to say no. Ted?
Yes.
Yes. Jack?
Yes.
Yes. Mark?
No.
Dawn?
No.
So that motion failed by 5-2.
I need another motion.
So we would need another motion to accept a different steel bid.
Motion to accept the J.P. Cullen bid.
Second.
Okay, and let's do that also by roll call. Katie?
Yes.
Judy?
Yes.
I will say yes. Ted?
No.
Jack?
No.
Mark?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
So J.P. Cullen has been accepted by 2. Thank you. Considering on, or going on with our facility meeting, consideration for our furniture vendor. Steve, could I turn that over to you to explain that?
Sure, I did put some background in the agenda notes, and for those of you that were interested in taking a deeper look at it, in the extra section we did have the full proposal, which was quite lengthy, from the firm that is being recommended. We did have a group that was put together to interview potential referendum furniture vendors. So that group included a representation from Heritage Elementary School, the middle school, central office, as well as our architect Epstein Ewan. Several of our building administrators had the opportunity to do some site visits and do some checking on some of the work that these vendors had done in other districts. The 3 vendors that we interviewed were Demco, Duet, and Atmosphere. At the completion of the process, the recommendation is to look at the firm Atmosphere for a recommended approval. I did want to just take a moment and share just a couple of pages from the 54-page presentation, so as board members you could get a sense of what this process looks like, because this is a little different than the process that we followed in 2014. Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind going to this section towards the end on the purchase. Oh, right there, thank you. So it's important to understand as far as the use of resources when we enter into an agreement of this type is that the furniture vendor, so if the Atmosphere proposal is approved, works off of existing contracts as really a backstop to the entire process. So Atmosphere in their proposal is stating about in the middle of the page that they participate in cooperative and buying contracts for the following agreements. So the University of Wisconsin has contracts that are already negotiated that school districts can participate in. So Atmosphere has participated in those contracts. The state of Wisconsin itself has contracts that school districts can participate in. And then there are other agreements that are considered more regional or national in nature. Omnia is one of those, which is a national purchasing contract put together by other forms of government that we can participate in. So you will know that by selecting a firm like Atmosphere, and the other firms had the same type of setup, the purchases will, at a minimum, be at pricing that has already been negotiated by other forms of government. But our hope is to have better pricing than that. So eventually, a firm like Atmosphere would put together all of the tables in the new school, would be able to purchase them off of one of these agreements, but would also be able to see if better discounts are possible due to the volume. So they work on our behalf to go out and obtain the best pricing that is possible. They also work with our staff in going through the process of selecting furniture options to then go out and obtain pricing. So it's important to note that from a pricing perspective, whether it's the Atmosphere or the other 2 vendors that we looked at, we ultimately will have at a minimum existing contracts that we can utilize for the purchases of the furniture. And under our purchasing policy, that is allowed as one of the exceptions without board approval, is either state or local or regional purchasing contracts. So just know that that's there and it's embedded in this agreement. The interview group is recommending Atmosphere because of the overall program that they have put together for our district, as well as work that they've done in other districts. And I do believe Jeff is here if anyone had a question specifically. For Jeff as a building administrator, he participated in the process and had an opportunity to do some additional research into Atmosphere. So I know that he'd be happy to answer any questions, but the recommendation is Atmosphere from the administrative team that participated in the interview process.
And do you need board approval on that? So
would.
you need a motion to accept Atmosphere from us.
Yes.
So I would need a
I
motion.
make a motion to accept Atmosphere.
Second.
Any other questions about that? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Thank you. Steve, would you also do the capital projects?
Sure, thank you, Joan. So the last agenda item for consideration tonight from the committee is our capital project list. The funding mechanism for the capital projects for this year has been reviewed by both the Budget Committee and the Facility Committee with a recommendation to utilize Fund 49. And for those viewing this, Fund 49 means a capital projects fund funded through a referendum. So both committees are recommending the use of referendum funds for the capital projects that you see in front of you. Historically, we brought to the board about $525,000 worth of capital projects each year. The total between what the board approved last month and what is in front of you this month is $517,000. The facility committee asked at the prior meeting for administration to organize the capital projects in a clearer manner to bring them forward for your consideration in the future. We did work with Vogel to create a new format that we shared with the facility committee that will hopefully be easier to track moving forward. So that is included in your packet, our process that we're going to be utilizing for tracking the funds moving forward, what projects have already been approved by the board, which is in the top section, what is pending, and what is pending right now is really the review of the softball field that the board has approved, and then really what is in front of the board tonight is the section at the bottom. That's a combination of projects that we would be requesting on an annual basis and 3 larger HVAC projects. Those are projects that have been identified by our selected partner, North American Mechanical, as the 3 highest HVAC projects across the district. Those projects do fall within the scope of the district-wide capital maintenance portion of the referendum. So the intent was always to evaluate North American Mechanical's highest priority projects. Those are included on the list, so you will see the 3 North American Mechanical projects and the remainder of our annual capital maintenance projects in front of you this evening. John is here as well, could certainly answer any specific questions you might have about any of the projects, but the facility committee did review them and move them onto the board for consideration this evening.
Any questions? If not, I would like a motion to accept this.
Motion to accept the capital projects as presented.
Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And there is that one last thing, Steve, on changing the contingency dollar amounts for, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, thank you, Joan. So we've talked a little bit tonight about our existing purchasing policy, which the board may or may not view as a good fit for a referendum project. Back in 2014, the board made a decision to go with a different process for the use of contingency. So in our referendum projects, we do have funds set aside that are called contingency that are available for issues that would come up throughout the length of the project. What we have in front of you tonight is an option for consideration that changes the amount that the superintendent or designee could approve from $25,000 and under, which is the current purchasing policy, to up to $49,999. It inserts a level for facility committee approval. So in the event that there would be something, let's say that's $75,000, we would call the facility committee together to review that. Or $100,000 and above would be an issue that the full board would need to review. So it's important to note that we have an understanding with Vogel that contingency expenditures would need to follow a process. So we have shared with them that this was an example of a process that the facility committee was going to review. The facility committee did recommend moving this forward for a 3-0 motion. So it's slightly different than our standard purchasing policy, but we do feel that that would provide the ability for the superintendent to continue moving the project forward if it's under that dollar amount, and then to engage both the facility committee and then ultimately the full school board. But just note that this is different than what is in our current purchasing policy. Randy?
I mean, I think just to kind of look at it from a logistics standpoint, if something like this comes up that falls within the kind of under the parameters by administration, that's something that Steve and I and John would work collectively on to then make a decision as far as how we keep moving forward. We're just trying to find ways to keep the project moving forward without having to have it held up by trying to call meetings to come back. But we also certainly know that there are times when it gets to a certain level that we need to bring it back either to a committee or to the full board, and we just wanted to lay out those parameters. This is very similar to what we did when we built the intermediate school, and we felt it worked very well. But since this would be a change from what our current policy states, and this is only applicable for these projects, we do need board approval in order for us to then move forward with those parameters.
Motion to approve this process.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And that kind of ends our facility committee. Thank you. And now moving back up to the top of our committee list.
Okay, I'll just go on.
No, we're going to go back to HR and go through the rest. So HR committee.
HR is looking for some consideration for summer work hours, right?
Yes. I guess the proposal is fairly straightforward. The only thing I guess I would highlight within it is these weeks that we're proposing that we could adjust those office hours are Fridays are particularly low volume times. I mean, it would not be uncommon for of our 6 building sites, seven if you count the district office, that some of these Fridays could go by with maybe more than half of them not having a visitor on Friday. And so we think that we could deliver the services that are important to the community, and we could still then allow some flexibility for employees to use some time off at a time where it would not be impactful. And it would be especially helpful in our smaller offices where there is only 2 individuals that work 12 months of the year. And so then you really start to either have impromptu closures, or you have somebody staying behind for potentially no one coming to see.
So when you do this, is it they just take off? Are these hourly employees that?
So there's two types of employees.
You'd be reducing their salary?
They could use paid time off. All of our 12-month employees have vacation time or personal time, so they could substitute those hours for using that. They could adjust with their supervisor's permission, potentially adjust their hours and work more on other days. Or another option, they could, with their supervisor's permission and their work being done, could choose to shorten their work hours for the week and make less money if that was an option that was appealing.
So if you can work, let's say you're 4/10s, right?
In theory, yeah, something like that.
In theory, then they'd be potentially working 4/10s and taking Friday off.
That would be one option.
Do you have the work for them to do? Like if they were here on Friday, are they just sitting by their desk and not doing anything, or?
That's a great question, Jack, and I think I could confidently say that I don't feel like any office person that we have, administrator and office admin assistants, are ever at a point where they have everything done that they would just be sitting there for purposes of sitting there. I mean, there's, yeah.
I would assume that there's work to be
Yeah,
done.
there, absolutely.
So how does this work get done?
Well, it would be done at other times, or again, I'm not saying the offices won't be staffed, but what the communication we would provide to the public is, do not expect that an office will be staffed on a Friday, so that if someone does have something that they must do on Friday, they might be there, but then they could leave early, as opposed to a member of the public showing up and expecting that the office is open as normal, and there's a sign posted that said, gone for the weekend, right? I think this is more proactive in terms of allowing some recognition that work can be adjusted for timing, and that the public could know in advance that there are certain times that buildings just aren't staffed enough.
Would it be possible if there was an issue that, I mean, someone's available to deal with an emergency circumstance, I don't know what that might be, but.
Our administrators are required to carry their phones 24/7, so they're responsible for an emergency, even when they're not there.
Yeah, so this provision really doesn't impact administration. This is impacting hourly employees. It's really giving them flexibility. One of the things that's hard within our line of work is you don't have a lot of flexibility when people can take time off, and we don't want some of our staff taking time off in some of those positions while school's in session. So now you have kind of that window in the summer where you can provide some greater flexibility, and I think that's really what Brian's trying to work through here. Doesn't necessarily mean there's less work. It just means you have some flexibility with how you utilize your hours, and it also gives them at least some targeted time that if they're going to take time off, that they know when and how to do that. And it's for that, 6-week period of time? Is that about what it is?
It'd be eight weeks, 2 June, all July, 2 August. And then the offices would remain open as regular hours during summer school when students are there. And beyond that, summer school's in the morning, they're still there in the afternoons. This would only have effect on Fridays when there are no students scheduled to be in the buildings.
Yeah, I think it's an employee-friendly thing, and I also think it's community-friendly, because the community would know, okay, Fridays are not a day that you can contact. You have to wait till Monday. And to your point, that I think there are some staff members who might utilize the Friday to work a half a day and then take the afternoon off. And I just think it's something that's employee-friendly and does not hurt the system. And as long as the community's aware of it up front, it has virtually no impact on the community negatively.
I know that if I did listening sessions here at Bethel the last 2 years, and the staff brought it up, and they are extremely excited about this possibility. They would love to have a little flexibility in their hours. So any other questions for Brian? If not, if you're ready, I'd like a motion to implement this summer office schedule.
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. And that is it for HR this month. Moving on to policy.
Thank you, Joan. We have quite a few policies here. I think kind of following what we did last time, unless there's any issues that you want to pull some out to discuss, we can kind of take them as a whole. I think if we pull them out, I'd kind of like to have Randy go over it a little bit more detailed than last time.
Yeah, I think that's something we have about 20 policies here. So this is kind of just to kind of give Dawn a little bit of background of kind of how we've gotten here. Our policy review, we've contracted out with the School Board Association. They have one of their attorneys who's assigned with us and reviews our policies in side-by-side comparison with some of their model policies, which you'll often see referred to in the chart in your packet as the PRG, or the Policy Resource Guide. And then what they've made recommendations is to either keep an existing policy, tell us that we don't need a certain policy, modify a policy, or to replace it with one of the PRG models. So you'll see all of those examples in what you're seeing here tonight. After we receive that initial review from the WASB, then administratively, we take a look at it and we provide some guidance to it. We then meet with Ted as the policy chair, so he has an overview of it before we go into the committee, and then the committee goes through each one of the policies one at a time, provides their input. There was one on teaching about controversial issues that we did spend a little bit more time on. We actually discussed it at a meeting and then brought it back to an additional policy meeting before we brought it here tonight. That was our process for review. And I think, as Ted said, I think we can take them as a lot, but if there are any that you want to pull out, I think we just articulate from anybody around the table which ones you'd like us to pull out for separate consideration, and then we can have a further dialogue around those. But I think
That particular one, I think we did get some public feedback as well.
Correct.
381,
Yes.
so that we all-
Were there any other ones that you wanted to pull out, Ted, that you saw? And that one probably makes
Me
sense.
personally, no.
So, open to kind of feedback from the board or any questions?
If we pull out one, like 381, would that further conversation happen here? Or,
Yeah, no, we'd pull it out, and then what we do is we'd vote on the lot of the other ones, and then we'd come back and then consider 381 separately as the next item. Is that fair?
I make a motion that we accept all the proposed policies with the exception of 381.
Second.
Any questions on any of the other ones? Mark, I know you're studying. Do you have any questions on, you're all good with everything? So all of them except 381. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, so we're down to policy 381.
So 381 is teaching about controversial issues. When you take a look at the chart in your packet, the direction from WASB was either to keep our current policy or replace it with PRG 381. I mean, I think that was really the breadth of the dialogue around our table at the policy committee and administratively. I think that there are sometimes when we get so specific, it gets hard to implement. And that was a piece that we felt with the PRG model, was that it had a lot of different pieces to it that we felt we probably could pare that down. So our thought was to keep it initially at kind of the current policy that we had. Per a lot of conversation at the policy committee, there were some things within the PRG that resonated with members of the committee. So we administratively took it back, and you can see that the ones in the items in red were ones that we pulled from the PRG model per the discussion and feedback we had from the committee. And then we had further discussion about each of those at the committee level. And then this policy, as it's written and as Rebecca has it presented here, is what was recommended by the committee on a 3-0 vote for consideration tonight.
Thanks, Randy.
Yep, you bet.
So if I were to rephrase, just to make sure I'm tracking, the rationale to take just certain pieces of the PRG was that to take all of it was too significantly different from the current policy. And these were the elements of it that were felt were lacking in there was the addendums or additional material that's provided as training materials to educators on how to appropriately tackle this.
Right.
Is this extra language, I guess my question is this extra language necessary given that that training guide is provided?
Sure.
Which addresses some of these elements.
And I think these were all the conversations that occurred at the committee level too. I think the reason for wanting to add those pieces back in, and I can let members of the committee also share, is I think as we looked at the PRG piece, the feedback from our committee members was that there were pieces that they just felt made the policy stronger with regards to more specificity. And I think that was generally the language that we heard. So administratively, as we took kind of the tenets back, these are the items that we pulled in per that feedback. I agree with you, Dawn, and thank you for bringing that up. There are two other exhibits that were attached. These are both things that I think you've seen, either as board members or particularly the curriculum committee has seen with regards to, this is kind of a narrative view just to help staff kind of process through some of the controversial issues and how do you define that and how does that guide you? And then also the flow chart, which is just another representation of really a similar type of a framework to help with the conversation around controversial topics and helping to identify those. But I think from the committee's perspective, there was a desire to have some additional language than just what we had in our original policy, and that's what you're seeing here tonight.
And do we need to state that this is about the curriculum that the teachers are giving? This is what guiding that, not every interaction that they have with students. This is teaching them something.
Well, I think that's where our conversation went to a little bit in our meeting, and that's how I took it, is that it was the instructional material. It isn't current events that pop up that come in, although that isn't, it does tend to fall under this, or it could in terms of the parents maybe interpreting, but it really goes to how that material is not only presented, but how it is emphasized. That if there's a way that there are issues that the parent is concerned, they have a way to bring this to the administration or the principals to see if their voice is heard. So, Mark, you have a comment?
Yeah, from my reading of it, it just provides a certainty for staff, as for example, that as long as what they are teaching is connected to the curriculum, they should be teaching that. In the same breath, if a parent has a concern, there's an opportunity for the, and as there should be, that they can question that. You know, to me, both publics have to be served, the parents as well as the staff and the students. And I think this does a strong job of trying to serve both.
Yeah.
So if there's controversial topics, both sides are presented. Is that how I'm reading this?
The policy doesn't say anything about that. We don't state that they have to, but what they can't do is, I guess that's what it's trying to convey, is they're not imposing their views in terms of saying that the students need to behave this or act, understand this issue a certain way. Do you feel that should be in there? Like it has, I'm not sure how you'd actually tackle that.
I think the concept that was discussed at the committee level was that part of the educational process is causing kids to think about controversial items. And I think that that's an important part to make sure that that's covered here. I think that was one part of the discussion. There was also the piece of trying to ensure a level of neutrality as far as like if you're instructing that you're not imposing your own views into it. But I think and I think Mark, you were part of that conversation, which was like, I think it's here, that there are times when either kids or the discussion or the topic does render itself to kind of having points of view to be shared, and that trying to have an expectation of kind of what that looks like. So that was the dialogue that I think took place, and those were the things and why those were inserted in per the conversation at the committee.
And some things that weren't included, that were in the WASB, are when they kind of gave out listings of, it was sort of defining what the controversial topics were. Well, that in itself is there's some controversy there, because a lot of people think things that are controversial and others won't. So you couldn't have an all-inclusive list. So that was left off.
WASB was 4 pages long, and we didn't think policy should be that definitive.
It feels like the language that was adopted really does address how, and that the guides address what. the language that wasn't taken though was some of the bullets that really did address that it is sometimes necessary. And I think that one of the addendums does touch on that. Should the policy also acknowledge that controversial topics, discussing them and educating around them has value? And does it address that as strongly as the policy?
Well, the first sentence, controversial questions shall have a legitimate place in the work of the Waunakee schools. I think that's important to say.
So
And that's strong enough by itself.
thank you. That's what I was looking for too, is I knew there was a piece that was where it started. So the original policy was just what's in the black letter. And then what was added was what was in the red.
Any other questions? If not, are we ready to accept this policy?
And if I can just add, then the exhibits are the two other items that Rebecca pulled up, and those were items that have been developed for utilization with staff to help kind of guide through the process.
But it's not part of the policy.
Those are exhibits that are we're going to attach them with the policy, but they're really administrative items. But they provide supplemental support to this policy.
I move that we accept policy 381 as adjusted on this document.
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor of that policy, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
I would hope that those addendums are an annual active thing with our staff, so that at the start of the year, new staff and even returning staff are aware of this is the process. It's the new now, and it will be there to help them, rather than say, okay, it's there, but then now we've shared it once, now we're done.
And where are they located, those addendums?
I'm going to ask Tim or Amy from the back. The question was, those addendums, the chart, where are those located at for access? They are going to go as the exhibits, and then that'll be a piece that we'll also be sharing out with the staff. And that's the piece I think the board is bringing up, is that we'll have to revisit kind of where those pieces fall so that they're visibly and accessible to the staff, and make sure that there's something that we are bringing back to them as part of that dialogue.
I mean, if the question is, where are they for staff?
That's the question.
That is the question.
So we have presented those to staff. I think it's our intention that we should revisit them during the back-to-school period of every year. For staff members with staff access to the district website, when they go in under the curriculum and instruction section, one of the sections is related to these resources, and so they're always available for staff.
And my understanding too is that the flow chart document was the original.
Yes.
And then perhaps maybe there was a team of staff that worked.
Gave us feedback.
It gave feedback, so we tweaked it. Okay.
Document that captured it.
So they've seen it.
Yes.
And then they've.
I like that that you take their feedback and you modify it based on their feedback. I appreciate that. Any other comments on policy? Moving on?
Nope, we'll be continuing to move on with policy. The 400 series will be kind of our next piece. And
Will those be all done by next board meeting?
That's by the fall. That's what we're shooting for.
So I think we have just one committee left, budget. Kind of a lengthy one, but we're ready to tackle it.
All right, thank you, Joan.
That's great. So the budget committee met, we reviewed the budget, which we'll be presenting tonight, and you guys will be voting to accept it. Talked about the Taher food service proposal. The other thing we talked about is the special ed coordinator job position that we'll be voting on. So with that intro, Steve, take her away.
Thank you, Jack. So a couple things that I just want to make sure I share with the board members in particular that aren't on the budget committee, just to give you some background with some of the information you see in the notes. The first draft of the budget is really a document at this point of estimates. So Jack mentioned earlier today that we are in the state budget process. So we've shared with the budget committee what the governor has proposed for education in the state budget. We've shared what some other school administrators are advocating for in the process. And we've also shared what we've included in our planning process. So keep in mind that the document has a significant amount of estimates in it, which we do include in the notes here so you can get some background on what we've included in the first draft of the budget. You also have an opportunity to look at what some of the priorities are that we have included in the first draft of the budget. The board has already approved the additional position, teaching position at Prairie Elementary School. The board has already approved the bilingual program a few months ago. We have included those positions in the first draft of the budget. We've included estimates for wage increases. Now keep in mind, we've not presented any wage increases yet for board approval, but we have estimates included. We've included information on health and dental insurance as the school board has approved the 23-24 benefits at the previous school board meeting. What is new to some of the board members is the information that we shared regarding special education. Tiffany did have an opportunity to attend the budget committee meeting and shared information on programming for next year. We did share with the budget committee that the business office works closely with the special education department to really maximize funding from local, state, and federal sources so that we can provide as many resources as we possibly can to students utilizing all of the funding sources for special ed. So we do have information in there about the special education positions. We do also have information in there about our referendum. So what is new to us since our last referendum is what's called Fund 49, which is a fund where all of the referendum approved projects must be accounted for. So we've added a Fund 49 for you to be able to see in the first draft of the budget. We have included the debt service fund, which is the fund where we have to pay off the debt that is issued through the referendum. As you know, the board has approved several of the borrowings so far, so that has been reflected in this document as well. It's important to keep in mind that we will be monitoring the state budget process very carefully. Our understanding is that discussions around school finance will occur later this month, and we hope to have as many updates for you as possible at the June meeting. I'll start with see if anyone has any particular questions for Tiffany. We did have a memo that we shared from her that was identifying positions for next year and really the sources of funding. The budget committee did take a look at that and did recommend approval. But before we go on, why don't we see if there's any questions for Tiffany on that aspect of the first draft of the budget.
Need a motion to approve that? Make the motion to approve the special education position as requested.
Second.
Any questions for Tiffany? And thank you for being proactive with this. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
Great, thanks,
May I
Tim.
ask who seconded that? Oh, okay.
Katie?
The only other thing I didn't mention yet, two things regarding the first draft of the budget is we do have a food service proposal that is included in the student fee agenda item, which is next. And then secondly, I wanted to talk for a minute about property taxes. So as board members from last fall, you will know that during the referendum process, we did communicate about the board's long-standing goal of a consistent property tax rate across fiscal years. We did adjust that last fall because of the significant inflationary increase that existing properties were seeing through the equalization process from the state of Wisconsin, the property values. The board adjusted the property tax rate last October to decrease it from the $10.89 to $9.68, with a goal of having as much consistency as possible for property taxpayers in the community. This budget keeps that concept for this fall with a goal of trying to be as consistent as we can as the debt is issued for the referendum. That means we would want to look at what is called net new construction, which is information on the new property in our community that comes to municipalities during the month of August. So we don't have that information at this time, but this budget is built on the concept of a goal of seeking consistent property taxes for our community this fall. And Jack, if you wouldn't mind sharing some comments on that you shared at the committee level?
Yeah, and I think that's important because when we went out and talked about the referendum, we talked about keeping, the amount of taxes that we're paying consistent year over year. And that was more for a planning, so families are budgeting and things like that. So that made sense to do that. So that's kind of the direction that we took last fall, and we're just maintaining it.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. So the goal is to maintain that this fall, and we will continue to update this document as we learn additional information. At this time, I would be more than happy to answer any questions that any board members has about the first draft of the budget. We certainly can bring it up on the screen if anyone wants to look at any particular pages, or if you have any questions about the attachments or any of the notes, we'd be happy to talk about any of those topics. The Budget Committee did recommend the first draft of the budget for approval this evening at its meeting, but obviously there's a lot of information here, and we'd be happy to jump into any topics that board members would like us to review for you.
I did have one question, Steve, that I meant to bring up at the committee. The English positions at the high school, it says 1.5. Those are fully new positions, or I know we had a retired teacher come back and we had a teacher leave and there was a lot of shuffling in English, but is this 1.5 new positions?
So the best person to help me answer that would probably be Brian, because I know Brian spent a lot of time working to make sure that we have the staffing correct in here with the principals. Brian, are you able to share any insight into that?
Yes and no. So the yes part I can say is that there was an interest in an additional L1.0 FTE. I can't speak to what the 0.5 FTE would be right now I don't recognize that 0.5, and perhaps I have it in my note, but I know the 1.0, but I don't know about it.
And were teachers doing an overload, or are we lowering class sizes, or more electives, all of the above?
Yes, and so it would be, and again, I'm going to speak from recollection here, and so, but what we had looked at, and the reason we put in that additional 1.0 was that the number of teachers within the department that were going to then go into this arrangement where they're taking a 6th class or an 11th class as opposed to 10, it was gonna
be almost universal, and then there was still gonna be some that had to then go and take a 12th class, which would be a, you know,
And
a
that's-
max overload, right? And so the idea was to get an additional FTE to keep the majority of those individuals at a regular 10 teaching load of 10
Okay, all right.
for a school year.
I was just wondering. Thank you.
So we can confirm that with you for the second draft of the budget.
Yeah, I just wondered, because it seemed, 1.5 seemed like a lot, but
The other .5, just to add in, are the positions listed in English, but it's the position that provides reading, writing workshop at the high school. It's a .5, it has been a .5 position. As we look at students coming into the school and we look at, you know, our current set of students, we see a need to increase the amount of reading, writing workshop
okay.
sections.
And that's
So
great.
that's why we've gone from .5 to 1.5.
Perfect.
That's where the other
Yeah,
.5
thanks, Tim.
thank you, Tim, for clarifying that. Okay, that was my only question.
Motion to approve first draft of the budget.
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. But we still need to do student fees, separate from,
Yeah, the second agenda item request for approval is the student fees for the 23-24 school year. They're included in the attachment. We did have the opportunity to review the food service changes with the budget committee. And so you do see the changes in the recommendation on the food service end. Our food service department is working through significant inflationary issues on food, as everyone is aware of from home. The goal is to balance the food service department. It is not to have a profit. It is to make sure that we can balance it. It is unlikely that we will balance this year due to inflationary food costs, but the goal would be with the rates that you see in front of you tonight to get it to balance next year. And then other than that, you just see a few other small changes in there.
I have a question. Does Taher provide Madison County Day, West Christian School, and the Senior Center? Do they prepare it in our facilities and set it up?
That's a great question. So we do have agreements with 3 entities as well that Taher does manage. So the Village of Waunakee, the Senior Center program, the food is prepared on district site and is then taken over to the Village of Waunakee Senior Center. Madison Country Day and Westside Christian, we have staff at those facilities that are Taher staff. So it's really a partnership. Obviously, our staff here works on it as well, but we do have people that we also place in those schools. And those programs have been beneficial for both our district and the private schools because it allows us to work together and partner with them to provide those programs. So it does not detract from our program in any way, it just benefits it. The same thing with the program that we share with the village for the Village Center.
Calling volume, pricing.
Steve, just a question came up from when I was at one of the conferences. Do the free and reduced students at both the middle school and the high school have access to this identical menu?
Sure, that's a great question. So we have a student financial assistance fund that is active in, a part of what they do is the food service program at the middle school, high school, and what we offer students. We have used student financial assistance fund resources to place deposits into an a la carte fund for students who are approved for free and reduced. So we do provide some funding that is supplemental to what would be a meal that was offered under free and reduced. But our committee's looking at our next meeting about going in a different direction. Instead of providing supplemental funding for a la carte, the committee's looking at instead a program where all meals, including the chef's meals or anything that would be available at the high school, would be offered in lieu of
this $25 credit that's been deposited in students' accounts. So that is on the agenda for the next Student Financial Assistance Committee meeting, which would be just a different way of spending some of that funding. But in general, we do have a program at the high school that has supplemental funds and the meal that is provided, and we're looking at going a little bit different direction for next year.
So if ready, I'd like a motion on the student fees for 23-24 school year.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Thank you. So moving on to administrative reports, our first middle school design update.
I think we have Chris Michaud, who is coming in virtually. Hi, Chris. Thanks for being patient with us.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. So, Chris, let me do a little bit of a preamble, and then I will kick it over to you. And Jeff, you can come sit up at the white table, because you're going to be a big part of this. What we're excited to share with you tonight is the work that the middle school visionary team has been doing. And just to kind of, again, update Dawn here a little bit, our visionary team is working with Epstein Yoon as our architect. Chris Michaud is one of our design architects. And they and their team work through with a group of staff from the middle school, administration. Tim Schell is part of that. I'm sit on there. Jeff and Mike as part of administration, and then people who represent the staff at the middle school are also part of that. And the question that Chris and his team are posing is, how do you teach? And then designing the school around the ways that we deliver instruction, and then also based on some of the research best practices. So that's really what the visionary team is. And Chris is going to provide an update on some of the work that they've been up to, and also some of then the structural design or the conceptual design that we have for the initial view of what the middle school looks like. Before I turn it over to Chris, I just want to kind of back us up a little bit to 2012, 2013. We put together our long-range facility plan. And one of the things that we heard from the community, and we shared with the community at that time, that as we set forth a long-range plan for our facilities, we make decisions that then impact subsequent stages. So if you're deciding how many middle schools we're going to have, well, the decision at that point was we wanted one middle school. We didn't want to divide our community into two middle schools. But that requires you then to have a larger school. So part of the concept of managing a larger school for students and remain, which I believe is paramount to our work, is creating connections with kids, is you create smaller learning environments within a larger school. So that's part of what you're going to see tonight. And I think part of the discussion that we've had at the visionary team was, do you create kind of learning, and you'll see how the school is designed. It's designed around kind of a team concept, but do you develop the teams around a topical area, otherwise like a math unit and a social studies unit and a science unit? Or do you create it around a team where you have you have 2 science teachers, 2 English teachers, 2 math teachers, 2 social studies teachers around a pod? That's the model you're going to see tonight. And we felt that was the best, and partially I think our visionary team, our administration felt that was best as part of keeping that smaller learning environment and greater connections with kids. But there was a dialogue, and there were voices thinking that more of a departmental structure was appropriate. But I guess sticking with the vision as far as how we kind of came to our long-range plan many years ago, I felt that it's very important, and I think instructionally it's really important to keep smaller units together where teachers can get to know those kids in smaller units within the school. So that's kind of the concept you're going to see that's going to get repeated tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who's on the screen, and then Jeff to talk about some of the things that are coming out of this plan and what they look like, who's been involved, and then kind of what our next steps in the work are. And then Chris will be able to show you kind of what some of those initial designs look like. So I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Randy. And it looks like you're bringing the presentation up. Okay, so everyone can see it. Here's, can it get any larger? Is that okay? All right, so let's go to that first slide there. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in there tonight. It's a long one for everybody. We'll try to be brief, but we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to understand how the development's coming along here and how we got here. Just some quick housekeeping. This first slide up really is just to indicate where we are in the project. As I'm sure everyone has seen this many times probably, the design of a project is broken down into phases: schematic design, design development, construction documents. And we're at kind of 3/4 to the tail end of that schematic design phase right now. That will be finishing up at the end of the month, beginning of June. At that point, we'll go to design development. And schematic design is really the part where we're doing that higher level thinking, that higher level imagining of what it is, and coming up with the design for the building. And there's a lot of things that will go into that design in the subsequent phases. But this is really like, if you were to show me a couple plans and images of what this building's going to be, what it's going to look like, where the spaces are going to be, that's kind of what schematic design gets to. And when we get to the next phase of that project, that's when we begin to layer in our consultants for mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural, civil. Everyone starts to get into that. We as architects begin to look at each of these spaces in much higher level detail. We begin to design casework and architectural features throughout the building. And that's where what happens in that design development phase, all the coordination with our trades, with our consultants, and that next level. When we get to construction documents, the building is largely, designed, but that's that final level of detail. We're doing specifications, we're designing details that the construction manager can then go out. It's essentially the instructions for constructing the school to a certain degree. Everything in these construction documents will indicate to the people bidding on the project what exactly is in the building, how it gets put together for our specifications. So you can see here we're at the end of May is schematic design. That puts us a little bit towards the end of September for the end of design development, and a little bit like towards the end of February for construction documents, at which time the project will go out to bid and construction will begin. Go to the next slide, please. So, as Randy indicated, a visionary team was established with this group in similar fashion that we did at Heritage and at intermediate school. And one of the first things we did with this team as a thought starter is say, hey, you've been working in a building. Some of you might not have had the opportunity to work in other buildings or buildings that were more modern in the way in which spaces were developed in those. So we want to go and look at a couple other schools that are newer and that talk about these ideas of small learning communities and show how you can arrange them differently. They look at middle school level and beyond. As you see, we toured Middleton High School's newly completed facility, as well as Parcher Middle School, which is in Burlington, and Forest Park, which is in Franklin. They all have these different levels of shared and public spaces, these different levels of infrastructure that supplement the curriculum that's being taught at these levels. And this facility in Waunakee for the middle school will differ quite a bit from that of the intermediate school because we're creating a little bit more specificity in some of the spaces because students are beginning to get introduced to some of those exciting curriculum that they then can pursue further in further depth when they get to high school. The other thing that we wanted to understand is as the staff walked and administrators, Jeff and Mike and Randy and Tim, as we walk through the buildings, you see things. It's important to go to a building because you can actually be in the space. You're not looking at a static photograph. So as people are in the spaces, they can begin to react and talk about the feelings that they're feeling in those spaces. Like, this is darker, it needs more daylight, or this is too loud, or I'm not sure I really like the adjacencies of these two spaces this way because of this reason, this reason, this reason. So it begins to get people thinking about the different types of spaces and how schools can be built. And that leads into, and if you go to the next slide, a series of meetings then that we have. And we start at this high level, and like Randy said, we start having a conversation about, hey, how do you teach? How do students learn nowadays? What does the future of education look like in your school? We give presentations about modern learning and the impacts modern learning and the facilities have on modern learning. And through these conversations, we begin to drill into things that are important that we want to make sure that we hone in on. And you can see this is one of the visioning questions that we posed to the group. And some of the things which floated to the top were illustrated in bullets on the slide here in terms of visionary, out-of-the-box thinking. There's a lot of conversation about making sure we understand what community we live in. And it's a tight-knit, small community. And characteristics of that, how that gets reflected in the school on a day-to-day of students. As you go to the next slide, a lot of these conversations then culminated in what we call guiding principles. And we had the same we had a set of guiding principles for Heritage, and we had one for the middle school here as well. And really, this is kind of the litmus test. As we go through designing the facility and we begin to organize the building, which you'll see in just a little bit, we begin to say, what are the things that are going to help us answer questions when we get to a fork in the road? We want to make sure that everything we do, every design decision that we make, is being made for a reason, and it's going to be held up to these guiding principles and analysis. So they talked about making sure that the building's welcoming, safe for everybody. Encouraging exploration and creativity in the building was huge, hands-on learning. We want to be able to provide those types of opportunities for students so they can continue to explore their education and take it to the next level. Sustainability and what that means has always been a major tenet in this district, and everybody voiced that in the meeting. So not only will the building itself have a number of sustainable features similar to the other facilities like geothermal, solar-ready roof, and some small array maybe, but we're also looking in similar fashion to other facilities how the school itself and the spaces in there can begin to act as learning points for students in sustainability or in environmentalism. So, showing off some of the infrastructure, having learning points throughout the building and so forth. Those are all conversations that we're having, and those are ones that were voiced by the team. At the end, this empowering and enabling, these students have moved on from 5th and 6th grade, entering 7th and 8th, and this is preparing them for that next chapter in high school. So the building itself needs to be able to support that. We need to be able to allow students to practice a little bit more individualism or autonomy and giving them a little bit more agency over their education as opposed to as much handholding that you might see in the younger level grades. So the spaces in the building will allow for a little bit more latitude in that so students can exercise some of that and have a little bit more directive on their education for themselves. So with that, we didn't just talk about stuff in words, we actually did a little bit of architecture too. So if you go to the next slide. It kind of starts with how you want to organize the building. And through these conversations, like I said, we start very high level, but some of the things that were coming up consistently in the conversations was how the major components of the building wanted to be organized. There were a couple of things which wanted to be maintained. One was that there's a level of equity as people access the building. So people that are arriving via car or people that are arriving via bus, that when they enter the building, they enter to the same space. And we took this approach in Heritage, and it's also executed at intermediate school. And that was kind of an important organizing factor. One of the other ones was the small learning communities that Randy was referencing before, what we call the schools within the schools. That those have a proximity to the encore spaces. It's the other classes that students are taking to explore some of those interesting things like tech ed or ag or culinary or whatever it is that they're interested in, music and so forth. So is there a way in which we can arrange those in proximity to one another to try to lessen travel distance, to make sure that students are immersed in seeing those all day, every day as they go from class to class. And the other was, thinking about how the building operates, and a lot of the times the gymnasium for a building is used after hours and on weekends. So thinking about, does it make sense to position that in a specific location in the building that allows for that to work so portions of the building can be closed during different times of the day. So you get this kind of boxy diagram that's up here where the green is the gym, the blue and the white are kind of that central entry area, and the yellow is the small learning communities, and the red is kind of that those encores. And it all kind of begins to knit itself together. And this was superimposed over the site as we were working on this, because we do have some property and a site that we have to stay within the confines of. So as we go to the next, I'll begin to explain how the footprint of the building is positioning itself on the site. So one thing to keep in mind, which I'm sure everyone is pretty well aware of, but maybe you don't have quite as much knowledge as to the extremes of it, from the north end of the site to the south end of the site, it has a pretty dramatic grade change. I think it's 935 to 940 at the north, all the way down to 920. So we need to figure out ways in which, as you go from north to south, you can negotiate that grade change that works with the building, so you don't have a pile of different level changes throughout the building, which can be challenging for some students. So that was one of the main challenges. The other is the northern portion of the site is kind of narrow, so we need to think about how we utilize that site. As we go further south on the site, we do get a little bit more latitude. But we also are taking into account that we know that this is going to be a large building. And we want to make sure that we're being mindful of the context that we're building in. So there's specific strategies that we're taking to set the building a little bit further back away from the street, because we know that there are 1 and 1.5 two-story homes directly across the street that are small in scale. And we're also looking at how we can utilize that grade change from north to south to potentially embed, or I don't want to say submerge, but embed the gym into the ground a little bit, so it's not a large volume, but it's much more reduced and much more scaled to what's happening on that street. So just to run around the site here, you can see the two larger arrows for the main entrance of the building and the bus entrance, and that's coming from that diagram that you just saw on the previous slide, where the two entry points go into a central area right at the beginning, right in the center of that building, where the kind of the joint or the knuckle of it is. And that's where the student commons would be. That'll be the cafeteria for the building when you get in there. As you go down towards the south, you can kind of see how access to the site occurs. So I don't have in and out arrows, and this is still a very preliminary site plan that we are working through with our civil engineer currently. So this is kind of a snapshot in time. But the thought is that cars can enter off of South Street. In the middle driveway, we can have multiple cars stacking next to each other in the queue line, and then circle around out where I think just below where it says main entrance, that's where they would exit the site. Buses will go around the north end into the back, queue up in the back, and we're investigating ways in which the buses can then loop back and exit the same way they came in, or if they will go all the way around the building, exit out at the south end of the site. We have a small area for ag and tech ed, where we can have people pull up a truck or a van and offload some materials or larger things that you want to bring in and out of the building. We're also investigating other points down there that we can get access to those facilities. And then there's also a north entrance, because you can see we've split parking on this site as well. So we've got some parking up at the north, some parking sort of central to the building. All the parking is gauged off of the municipal requirements that we have for this type of facility. Just off the slide to the top, that's where the practice football field will be, and then the existing track that's there, that 300-meter track will be up there as well. So on the site, those would be those athletic facilities and some of the green spaces that students can use during recess. We're still investigating what playground and everything like that looks like at this point. And we are still investigating how servicing and receiving works for this building. The thought right now is that all the service and receiving vehicles would enter at the north and deliver everything at the northern end of the building. We're still looking at exactly how that works itself out at this point. But we have some pretty promising ways in which I think we can get through that. If we go to the next slide, I can talk through about how some of the interior functions of the building are laying themselves out. So if you remember that diagram, which just had the boxes on, there's the green and the yellow and the red, and you can begin to see now those areas and how they're beginning to relate to one another. So back to those two big triangles, those are the two entry points, and they come into those commons and cafeteria areas. And everything to the north of that commons and cafeteria area on the first level, you're looking at a large gym. So to give you some scale, the intermediate school gym is a 2-station gym, 2 basketball courts fit in there. This will be a 3-station gym, so think 3 basketball courts in line. So it's a little bit larger than the intermediate school gym in terms of footprint. Off of that, there'd be, the support for that, including locker rooms, access to the outside. We also have some back of house in that area to support food service for the building. And that whole area is we're still thinking through with regards to how receiving works on it. Everything, as you go on the first floor, south of that commons area, so to the right of those 2 arrows, you can see administration. That's the main office to the building, right by the main entrance to the building. And then as you go along the front elevation of the building, all those red spaces, even wrapping around the south end of the building, face, LMTC, business, tech ed, ag, those are all those encore courses. On the other side of the hall, we have 2 small learning communities, and you'll see these when you get to the second floor. They stack directly one above another. So within those small learning communities, as Randy indicated before, it's kind of like a school within a school. So we're structuring these as 2 science, 2 math, 2 English, and 2 social studies, or 2 ELA. They also have a cross-cat resource room within each learning community. You can see that by that orange rectangle within the learning community. All the students' lockers will be within these communities. They'll be a little shorter, like 5 feet or so, or maybe 4.5, something that you can see over the top that promotes supervision. There'll be access to toilets within these, drinking fountain water bottle filler, small group instruction spaces, like small breakout rooms that students can use. Like, for instance, if a student's working with a specialist, or if a group of students are doing a podcast, they can have an actual space that they can do that in. There's a staff resource space where staff can collaborate with other staff, work together, and plan and prep together, as well as storage areas for the staff, just for that small learning community. So there's like a kit of parts that goes into each one of those. And nestled directly between the 2 small learning communities, we've reserved an area for special education. So on the first floor, this is more for students with special needs. So we have OTPT, we have life skills, sensory spaces, special ed toilet room. Those are, there's a couple other in there. Those all kind of nestle themselves on the first floor. And then as you go upstairs, this kind of replicates itself. So as we go to the next floor, you can see how those 2 small learning communities stack directly above one another. Special ed goes in between, and this is where we have the cross-cat office, we have interventionists, and I can't remember exactly who else is on there, but another special ed toilet is in that, so we have 1 per floor. And then you can see the remainder of some of the encore classes that are on the front elevation. There's areas in here where you see kind of like a white box that is open to below, and that means that these are larger volume spaces. So, the one on the far left is the gym, because we know that's a larger volume space. One's the cafeteria, one's the library, so similar to at intermediate school where we have a 2-story library. We're planning something similar to that at this facility as well. And some are openings in the floor we can bring daylight down into the center of the building because we want to make sure that we're bringing daylight into these areas.
Hey, Chris, one of the board members has a question, so Jack, why don't you pose your question right now? I'll let Chris or one of us answer it.
And one of the things that we've been talking about as far as tech ed is bringing tech ed and art together. And here we've got art and, is there a way to bring the business classes up to where the art classes are?
I think that was a large conversation as far as what are your adjacencies. And I think one of the things that we talked about, and Chris and Jeff can weigh into this as well, was that one of the places that we thought there was an immediate connection, like on that first floor, was like tech ed and ag. We're kind of comparable. And then help me out, Jeff, with some of the other conversations that we've had as far as with the encores, as far as who wanted to be next to each other and kind of how we needed to kind of structure some of that.
Well, I think there's two pieces to it. There's the desire for adjacencies, and there's also the fact that not everybody can be on the first floor, or everybody can be on the second floor. So you have to deal with the fact that there's certain things people want to do. And when we talked with the different stakeholders, we talked with tech ed, we talked with FACE, we talked with art, we talked with ag, a few others, we had to kind of prioritize, but also then look at what programmatically made sense for them. So for tech ed to be on the first floor is very critical, just from getting things in and out of the building and whatnot. So that was one of the things that kind of anchored them there. Art, ag is similarly, so that was another part of it with ag, and then some of the things with what they're trying to do programmatically as well. Art could benefit from a second floor location with access to things outside, skylights, natural light, and some of the different things that they could do from a second floor, maybe flexibility with their spaces, much more so than they could on the first floor. So we had to weigh some pros and cons of different things in the programs with what they wanted to do, and then go from there to put certain things on the second floor and certain things on the first or second floor. I can't remember if I said first there, so I apologize for that. That was a big part of the discussion. Really, the architects took a lot of information from our stakeholders individually themselves as what they want to do programmatically and what made sense for us both now and in the future. And they came up with this structure both for the first and second floor.
Yeah, we did hear that relationship in our discussions, and at the end of the day, positioning art on the second floor, there was a big push for natural daylight, and we do have an opportunity at the far south end of the building here that we're pursuing of allowing a potential area for art to break out into, and it potentially could be something that occurs outside as well on the roof. That would allow, maybe sun studies and things like that. Now is very appealing to the art group. We also have stairs positioned very close to this because we know that they're going to want to potentially communicate in that end. So we position everything down at the south end of the building to create this. You can see that long kind of white rectangle just in front of art. That end of the building is really, being fashioned as this kind of exploratory hub at the end of the building. As we go forward, or as we go to the left on here, you can see that student services, they staff directly with the main office, and they communicate via stair and elevator right outside there. And that was intentional too. They wanted to have presence on both floors, central to the building, to the students, easily accessible. And then as you make yourself further north to the left, you'd see music. They take view off the back side of the building there, so they have a music suite that you enter into to access all the different music facilities. And the only thing which is actually developed further that's inaccurate on this plan is that Playette green boxes there. They're actually to the right of the gym as opposed to the left shown on this. We had further discussions. And one of the things was that we have health classrooms associated with that, and we wanted to make sure that those were closer to the student body, a little bit more integrated into the facility and not all the way at the end of the system, so we switched those. Those are the plans that we have right now, and like I said, these are constantly changing. We'll be finishing schematic design at the end of the month, and with that, I can open up any additional questions that
Something that keeps coming up in meetings is about the weight room and the growing need for, just because we have so many students that are participating and it's continuously growing. So I see a gray area that's like next to the locker rooms. Is that on the first floor?
Are you questioning where the weight room would be?
Yeah,
That's
sorry.
second.
Yeah, it's actually, that's the one thing that's not accurate in this plan. If you see the word gymnasium here,
Okay.
it would be directly to the right of that and directly connected to the gymnasium. So we're exploring a way in which students can flow in and out of that fitness center weight room throughout class if they're doing stations for PE, or if there's a team in there practicing and they want to go back and forth. And likewise, there's also a multi-purpose wrestling space that would also be adjacent to the gym at that end next to the weight room as well. Those are two very large kind of footprint areas. Next time you see this, you'll see what they look like.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, thanks everybody.
Yep, we'll keep bringing these back as we refine them, but I thought this was kind of our first blush that we saw a week or so ago. We thought this would be really important for you to see kind of the stages of the work. What I really like about working with this team is they've also, when he talks about interacting with the staff, they've also met with each of the departments. They spend some time kind of talking to all of the staff individually outside of the visionary team to get input. And then kind of what Jeff was saying, kind of now we had to figure out, kind of we had to make the pros and cons decisions as far as where do all of those pieces stack within the building.
Oh my God, Randy, I totally forgot to talk about all the staff interviews that we had.
Yeah, that's all right. I got you, Chris. You're good.
Sorry.
No worries.
Sorry about that. Okay.
Yeah.
See you, everyone.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well,
So in addition to that, Jeff, you're gonna
yeah.
kind of touch on potential schedule change?
Yeah. Well, let me intro that to her for Jeff a little bit. I've asked Jeff to kind of come tonight because one of the things we have planned for this summer is for him and his team to take a look at how to do the daily schedule better at the middle school. This isn't a new concept that we've been talking about. It's something that I know Tim and I have talked about for several years, and as Jeff has come into the district, he has seen a need for it as well. And I thought this is a piece that when we look at it from an instructional standpoint, I think there's some areas that we have for improvement that we can take place before we get to a new school, but then obviously as we transition to a new school, having that already in place to move forward. So I've asked Jeff to put together a few things with regards to schedule and what's on his mind with regards to that, and then some timelines for you to at least kind of see what the pathways of that work looks like. So I'll turn it over to you, Jeff.
Jeff, there's this clicker by Steve that you can use so you can advance your slides yourself.
Well, let's keep moving then. So this is just a quick overview of what I'm going to go through over the next few minutes, and I know we're getting late, so I'll try to make those minutes a little bit shorter. But I just want to go through just where we're at, how we got here, and then what the goals are, and then our next steps and timelines moving forward. So this is just our current middle school schedule. It's set up by teams so that teams can follow their different lunches. Due to space constraints, we have free lunches, of course. So that's why it's a little bit more goofy, but it would just be 2/3 of that if we had 2 lunches, essentially. As you can see, we have a lot of transitions throughout the day. So every time you have a transition, that's 4 minutes that we have in our current building for kids to traverse the building and get between classes. And there's 9 of them at the moment, along with our 3 lunch periods. We do have an 8-period day with 44-minute classes, and then at the very beginning, we have an advisory or a win time. So it's win 2 days a week, which is a contact time equivalent to the high school. And then our advisory is opposite of those win days. That's 26 minutes long instead of the 44 minutes. So here's, when I first got here 3 years ago, I started hearing immediately about the need for a schedule change from our staff, amongst other things, but this was on the top of a lot of people's list. COVID unfortunately slowed us down in the discussion about the schedule change in my year 1, but in year 2 we did put together a scheduling committee. We met after school a handful of times over the course of that school year, talking about what we were looking for. And here are some of the challenges that came as part of that discussion. With the multiple transitions, you just don't have learning during that time. So every transition, you have that issue, not to mention the more transitions, the faster the pace of the school is. We do now have, because we added an advisory period 3 years ago, we have this advisory homeroom win kind of conflict. There's really 3 entities serving things that could maybe be served by 2 or fewer, depending upon how we might be able to do the schedule, so that we can find times for kids to both get that kind of landing spot at the beginning of the day, but also have times for them to be able to get support from their teachers when they needed to. With these short classes, we run into inefficiencies. Every time you have a class, you have to start up. Every time you have a class, you have to end. And so there's cleanup, there's setup, there's getting kids there, there's dealing with kids showing up late, there's all those kind of things, which makes things just really challenging. And by the time you divide up 44 minutes into setup time, taking attendance, getting your lesson organized, getting kids working, closing up the lesson, and then getting cleaned up and taken care of, you've exhausted your work time in a hurry. There's a lot of just unsmoothness to the whole process. And it wasn't a word until just now. But I was a math teacher, so I can do that, right? I think our kids and our staff are really looking for more time to dig in, so you can get kids set up, get them settled, give them some instruction on what the activity for the day is, but then get kids working and have teachers working with students as well, and being able to provide feedback and guidance in real time. So you get them working, and then before you can even really tell them how they're doing, the bell rings, they're off to the next place. The other thing that's interesting here is that students are coming to us from intermediate school with long chunks of time for both math and ELA. Then they come to the middle school for 44-minute quick hitters on math and ELA every single day. Then they go to the high school and they go back to longer chunks of time. So if we could get some longer chunks of time, that might be more consistent for our kids, but also provide us for greater opportunities for improved instructional practice as well. So here are our goals, which are kind of tied to our schedule. We're really looking for teacher-led instruction versus just teacher-direct instruction. And so what we really want to do is create time where teachers can give kids information they need so that they can work with each other, work individually, get feedback from the teacher, and then keep working. Gives them some opportunity to explore, and then also then, as they're doing exploration, have teachers moving about and giving those kids guidance, asking them the right kind of questions when they're getting stuck, giving them feedback on how they're doing, and then also then allowing students to further work with their classmates. And then that's going to lead us to that student growth, because when you look at what really leads to student growth, it's not the memorization that really helps them. It's being able to dig in, think, struggle, work through that gets that deeper learning and that higher level of student growth. So to try to get to that, as I said earlier, our committee met during the 21-22 school year. What came out of that was we really wanted some longer classes, in addition to that, some fewer transitions. We really want to improve that advisory homeroom efficiency that we don't feel is there at the moment. We also want some longer win time. Right now our kids have a 26-minute advisory, also 26-minute win. So if you're going to try to get help from a teacher, you get there, you start working on something, again, not a whole lot of time to really dig in and then try to do something, feel comfortable with it before you have to move on to the next thing. With all of this, we still use our homerooms for music lessons, so we need to try to find a unique way to make sure we're meeting those needs as well. And yet we also don't want to have to cut programming with some sort of new schedule that reduces tech ed offerings, reduces our language offerings, reduces anything else in that scope. It's kind of this yin and the yang that we have at the middle school between, we really like the middle school philosophy like Randy was talking about earlier. We have big schools, we want to make them feel smaller. So we have teams, we want to make sure that we keep that kind of idea. We also want our kids to start to get that independence with picking some different elective options and exploring their interests and seeing what things they might want to go into in more depth at the high school level. So all those things make it very challenging to create a schedule, because some schools lean more towards that middle school philosophy, which can sacrifice some of the elective options, and some schools lean more towards the junior high philosophy, but then it sacrifices some of that smaller kind of feel that we're looking for with our bigger school. So here in Waunakee, I think over my 3 years I've learned we're trying to find the happy medium between those two things, and that brings with it benefits but challenges as well. So what's next for us? Well, as a result of all those meetings with staff, we got stuck. We really couldn't come up with a schedule that really met some needs but didn't really compromise others. So we have our educational goals that I shared in the previous slide that I'm going to share along with Tim Schell and some other staff from our building with Michael Reddick, who is a scheduling specialist. He literally is the guy in the area who knows how to do school schedules and has different ways to kind of move things around and show some options. He also is really good at helping you identify what your priorities are that are big rocks and your priorities that are nice to haves. And I think that's something that we need someone outside of our district to help us kind of work through and figure out. Then weigh those pros and cons throughout that meeting. And hopefully coming out of that August 3rd date, this is a 3-day stint with Mr. Reddick, have 1 to 2 options that then we can bring back to the staff in August. Which leads us to this timeline. Hopefully then we have those 1 to 2 options and we discuss with staff in our August meetings and talk about what does Mr. Reddick think, what kind of options really make sense for what our goals are, and how we might decide to move forward. Going into then the fall and the early winter of 2023, just talk through again also like if we're going to try one of these 2 options, what kind of PD and preparation would staff need, along with also talking about when can we do some pilots for these. So our goal would be to come up with 1 or 2 ideas and then see if we could do like a 2 or 3 week pilot for these if possible in the winter so staff could kind of do a little tryout of them. I don't know if that's possible, but it's something that we're going to be looking into. And then further down the calendar, try to make a scheduled decision for the 24-25 school year in the spring of 2024, and then start providing staff with that PD that they need in this coming spring. I'm sorry, that's probably the wrong year because this is the spring of 2023. So I apologize for that. Spring of 2024 to the winter of 2024. And then so we'll have PD for staff that helps them get started and then continue to provide PD once we implement the new schedule in the fall of 2024. So that is our goal and anticipated timeline for this process. I think that was it. So I went through that pretty quick, but I want to make sure I left time for questions and other people's time as well.
Look at that, we're building a new school. Are we gonna have enough space to do you're talking 90-minute sessions, right?
We have not put a time on the length of the classes at the middle school. I think there's a desire to pursue on some people's part a 90-minute block for a potential schedule. I think that's one potential option, but I think there's options between 44 minutes and 90 minutes as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think the design of we've kind of considered all those pieces, but the design's not going to be a determinant factor.
No, our current building or the future building wouldn't be a hindrance to any of the options that we are pursuing.
Yeah, we've worked with Michael Reddick in the past. He's the one a number of years ago we brought in when we looked at all the elementary schedules. He worked many years ago at the high school in the block. So he works kind of internationally. The benefit he has is that when you're starting to look at schedules like Jeff and his team are wanting to explore, he can pull out ones from across the country that have had similar issues, and then you at least have some models to work with. So he's an excellent resource. So I'm glad that Jeff's able to tap into him.
I think the other thing too that he can help us with is he can tell us what's not possible. I think sometimes when we don't live schedules, we wonder, well, I think there's probably a way. He can actually say, no, there isn't, and he would know. Save us a lot of time and energy.
Jeff, who will be meeting with Mr. Redding?
So we have not decided that yet. That has not been part of the fall layout to staff yet, so, yeah. It'll be an invite. Staff who want to be part of it, we'll try to get 3 to 4 people from different parts of the building, some core people, some elected people, and who's willing to come in August for 3 days and do it, so.
Have you had any parent input?
Not at this point, no. It's a good question. Probably good thought, too.
Yeah, or student input.
Keep up the good work.
Exciting.
Yeah, exciting.
It's
Yeah.
exciting, and hopefully we'll come up with a good solution, and that will be exciting in of itself. And if we can get the schedule set before we get in the new building, that would be even better, so.
Yeah.
48 minutes, how do you hang on to your sanity?
I think it's what we've known.
Yeah.
And I think when you do what you've
Just
known for a long
rather
time, you
than
get used to it. But as a teacher who taught in 50-minute classes at high school and then moved to 90 minutes and was actually originally totally against the 90-minute block, I was the guy who was like, no way. And then I got into it, and then if you would try to take it away from me, I'd be like, no way. So what I didn't know was probably my biggest enemy when I was a teacher. And I think that's probably the case for us all the time with change. You always wonder, like, is it going to get worse? And oftentimes it doesn't, but that's the fear. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
for saying
Appreciate you
that.
being here. You're welcome.
Thank you. We are down to school calendar.
School calendar. So Rebecca's going to pull this up. One of the things that we've tried to do is we try to keep 2 years of calendars in front of us. We have a calendar approved for next year, and this is the one for 24-25. We have a calendar committee. Calendar committee consists of a few different administrators from around the district and also a number of staff and teachers from around the district, and then Joan sits on that committee as well. And then what our conversation is what are the parameters that we're going to put forth into the calendar. To be honest, there's not really a ton of decisions to make because we have some things that are legislated to us. We can't start school until September 1st. You know you have so many contract days that you have with your staff, and you have so many days you have with your students, and you have to have all of those married together. And then you take a look at where you have like your winter break, your spring break, and then also wanting to make sure that we are getting out in time, that we are in a place where summer school still allows us for 6 weeks of summer school. So all of those parameters put together, this calendar looks very similar to what you're seeing in the current year that we're in. You see that our staff development days are the ones that are in orange. The items in yellow are paid holidays this is a teacher schedule. And then you can just see the articulations as far as where we are with like a work day or end of the semester, end of quarters, end of trimesters, and we run all of those. Some things that we're doing this year that was requested by staff is the semester time frame isn't always the best grading period for our elementary teachers. So we're swapping out the work day in January for one of the professional development days in the spring of the year that aligns up closer to their trimesters. And we're just swapping the work that we're doing so that they're getting a professional development day in January versus the work day. And then they would have a work day in this case, that would be end of February, that would allow them to then have a work day closer to their grading period. So those are some things that we're trying out within the calendar. Otherwise, it's very similar to what you've seen in the past.
When you look at staff development day, staff work day, those are days that they're in the buildings but no kids.
That's correct. Yeah, the staff work day would be no kids. The staff development day, that's professional development days. Those get divided up between district level staff development and also leadership pieces within the building. And department chair meetings and the department meetings happen at some of those days as well. So all of our work that kind of works within departments, professional development, and buildings happens on those days. So.
I would just add that the makeup of that committee is, as Randy said, all different levels, but there is a representative from each building. And within the high school, there's somebody who's very familiar with sports and kind of, especially spring sports, where there's sometimes a necessity to leave early from school and kind of coordinate so that, the AB, he's kind of amazing. He keeps the ABs and when sports are and.
He's also an AP teacher, so he knows like when the AP tests are and
kind of like
where do you have your balancing between.
Yeah.
So he's
a counter. He counts, first semester, second semester, I didn't think of that.
Pretty much anybody who wants to be on the calendar committee, I invite in.
So it's good mix of people, and I think a lot of things are shared, and as Randy said, we try to meet as many expectations and needs as we can.
No, but this does need a board approval.
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So announcements and correspondence?
Just some of them you've already seen. There's a number of things that have been going on with our students. Obviously, the Sound of Music, for those of you who have been able to attend that. Jack mentioned at the beginning of our meeting about the Youth Apprenticeship and Mentor Appreciation. This is the Dane County School Consortium. This is 16 school districts that come together, and this was their end of the year kind of celebration where they recognize the business mentors, and then the students get recognized as well for their work. think we have 25 of our students that were part of the apprenticeship program, so this was recognition. That was held at Monona Grove High School. And then this past Sunday, yesterday I guess it was, at Oregon High School yesterday afternoon, we had the Badger Conference honors banquet or honors program where you represent all your top honors students from your graduating class. So the Waunakee kids, we had 10 of our students that were recognized yesterday, and Tim was there, I was there, and Brian Borowski was there to represent the kids. So, some fun days.
Thank you. Moving on to our consent agenda. We can take it all. I think actually we want to pull out our
1 year leave of absence.
the 1 year leave of absence in our the staff changes for next year. If there's anything else that you want to pull out, so while you're thinking about that, I just want to acknowledge a couple of things in the consent agenda. One is a $2,000 scholarship provided by Jan and Ted Tweed. It's a senior scholarship, usually in the music venue. We also have some contributions or donations this month. $100 in memory of Ken Wagner for our Student Financial Assistance Fund. $500 from Kelvin Khrushchev, again for our Student Financial Assistance Fund. And as we have had each month, the generous donation from our Pride Pump of $1,000 that can be used for any student needs from the Mefford family. So I just wanted to acknowledge our wonderful donators in our community. So with that, and we'll pull out that 1 year leave, is there anything else that you'd like pulled out of the agenda? Or more information about in the consent agenda? I know it's getting late. Kind of changes your need. So,
I move to accept the consent agenda with the exception of the staff change.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. And now we'll deal with the 1 year leave that was a special request. I would take a motion on that.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And I know that we may have some difference in that, so I'm going to do it by roll call. Filzer, the 1 year leave was?
Yeah, yes.
Yes. Judy?
Yes.
I would say yes. Ted?
No.
Jack?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And Dawn?
Yes.
Thank you on that. Okay, so with that, do we want to, board business. You want to comment on the staff recognition?
Yep, staff recognition banquet is this, or it's this Friday?
Yes,
It starts at 7 o'clock, is that right, Brian?
that's correct.
All right, and that's at the PAC at the high school. So if anybody would like to attend that, that's certainly something we open up to all the board members. And anything that you wanted to add about that, Brian?
It's shaping up to be a wonderful program. The videos submitted from our administrators are top-notch. And so excited to celebrate people's careers and their successes. So we hopefully, if you're able to attend, invite them to be there.
Great, thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Do you want to set meetings?
I think
Or should
let's
that
do those.
after?
Let's do those right now while I have people here. We need to do a special board meeting, because if that's something that you'd like to do to address the superintendent search firms, I think that was a piece that I think you'd like to do that yet this week, which means.
Well, should we look at Thursday night?
Does that work for you, Brian?
I will be out of town.
Thursday night?
So I think what we're trying to do is have, and I'm going to speak for you, Brian and Steve, is you're looking at a time at the last week of May to actually do the interviews. So with that, you're trying to give at least a couple weeks of notice for them to plan. So ideally, it'd be able to kind of narrow that scope down this week.
Yeah, I mean, if we looked at, as we looked at the calendar, we thought that the Tuesday, the 30th of May, would be an evening for interviews. And if we back 2 weeks up from that, that would really have this special discussion and decision by Monday, so a week from today. But,
So, is it possible to do it next Monday? If Judy, are you back Monday?
Yeah, I'm just gone Thursday night.
Okay. Monday, the 15th? Sure. Could we do a special meeting to determine who we want to interview?
Does that work for you, Brian?
yeah, that's fine.
You couldn't do it without me and be done? I mean, I don't want to hold everybody up.
I'll be out of town on the 15th.
You're gone too, okay.
You're gone on Thursday, and Jack, you said you're gone on Monday?
I'm out 15th through the 18th.
Oh, okay.
What about the morning of the 11th?
I still can't do it.
Busy?
Well, Friday morning.
Go on.
Not home yet.
Go on.
Okay.
Do you want to reconsider or do administrative? Just throwing it out there. It is almost 10 o'clock, I'm tired.
I don't think that's a dumb idea.
How many people do you have on Thursday if you did it after DEI? Is it just you, Judy, that is gone on that day, or is?
Are you gone, Jack? No.
No, I'm on.
You'll be here.
I think it would be everybody but Judy on the 11th. Does that work for you?
And Mark won't be
Oh, Mark.
there.
Oh, you're on the 11th?
On the 11th, I'm going.
For the DEI?
For the DEI?
Oh, no, oh.
The
When
11th.
is this?
On the 11th?
The 11th.
I'm
So,
not going.
so if we did it after the DEI meeting,
Not
yeah.
going.
So,
Then it's just me,
And
right?
it's just
are
you.
you okay?
I'm fine.
So why don't you look at, after the DEI meeting, why don't you say DEI's meeting at 5:30?
Is it really going that long? Got an orchestra concert at 7:30, so
I don't see it going more than 90 minutes.
That's,
I won't miss that, so.
no, you gotta be there for that.
Could we meet before? Just throwing it out there, I know that's tough.
Is there a better day this week? Can you do it Wednesday? That's 2 days from now. As long as we get it posted by tomorrow.
What's the
No,
earliest we
I
can meet
can't do it
on
on
Wednesday?
Wednesday, we're doing the high school AP interviews.
All
so
day, yeah.
It couldn't start till after, I would say safely 5:30.
Yeah.
So what would happen if you just push this meeting back to the 22nd and you push the interviews back 1 week?
You can do that.
What? We're still on timeline.
Can
up
everybody
to you.
make it on the 22nd?
No.
Here you go again. I can't do the 22nd.
No, you're good.
Brian and I can't do it,
You
right?
got, you got your daughter's piece. Yeah, I mean, to Jack's point, if you want to push it back, you can do that.
It just,
It's just 1 week.
What's that?
It's only 1 week.
Yeah.
So the morning of the 22nd or the 23rd in the morning or the afternoon or evening, would that work?
I'm gone the 23rd.
I couldn't get here till the 24th.
well, how many people could be here early on the 22nd?
When you say early, are you talking
You did like a
7:30.
morning, like a 7:30 in the morning?
7:30 on the
I could be
22nd?
there.
Yeah.
So we'd have everybody but Judy?
Dawn,
You feel
is that-
left out?
Does that work for you, Don?
Yeah.
7:30 on the 22nd?
7:30 on the 22nd to do the selection of the
You won't be.
interview. You're okay?
Yeah.
Does that work for you
Yeah,
in the
that's
morning?
fine, yep. I'm good till like 3:30 in the afternoon.
Yep.
7:30.
All right.
Oh,
The other, and
So just related to that, that tomorrow we'll email out to you the RFPs in advance of the agenda being released, so.
right. I guess the next item would be with regards to, we do need a couple committee meetings, but we don't know who our committees are yet. So we can we can do one of two things. We can just set the meetings and see if those will work. Or what we can do is wait till the committees are set and then we can work kind of on the side and get those set up.
Why don't we try that? We're going to try to get our committees set tomorrow, and we can get that to you, and maybe then
That's
you
fine.
can
We'll,
track.
that'll work. All right.
All right.
So,
At this point, I need a motion to return to closed session.
so move.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Who made the second?
I did.
Thank you.
So we need to ask